Hello, my name is Susanna Garden, and I would like to welcome you to the course From the Real to the Imaginary with Simple School or Prostая Школа. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the concept for the course and what we're going to be doing. So, as you maybe know already, the concept of the course is to assist people who maybe have some experience already with sketching or drawing from life, but somehow it can be a bit more difficult for them to move from drawing things in reality to coming up with an idea for a story or something with visual narrative that is imaginary. So in the first week, I'm going to give you some tasks, like as if you were kind of like a visual scientist. And we're going to be concentrating on drawing people and finding as much information as we can from carefully observing them. And the second week, the tasks will be similar. So I'm going to ask you to go to some interesting places in your home city and to also collect as much information as you can. And following that is like the second half of the course. We're going to be using the information or the materials that you collected, and we're going to be brainstorming and coming up with a simple story or a simple concept or a simple narrative connected with the information that you have. So this is the point when we start to use our imagination more. At this stage, you're going to be making storyboards and doing some planning for the final works that you produce. And then in week 4, you are going to be making the final versions. So the finished versions of your ideas. And just to give you an idea, by the end of the course, you should have all of the sketches from the beginning, plus the planning for the final works. And the final works that you will have, I'm giving you a choice of making one image, but this image has to have some storytelling or narrative. B, a small series of images, so it could be 2 or 3 images. And the third option is that you can make some small and not very complicated comics. So I hope that gives you a little bit more information. I'm definitely looking forward to meeting all of you, and just remember I'm here to help you through this process. And definitely can't wait to meet all of you. Sketchbooks are a very big part of my practice, and it's something that's very important for every person who's either an illustrator or even if you just do drawing as a hobby. Drawing regularly and drawing from life, it's incredibly useful, and it's something that I have found it's almost like learning a language. And if you do it regularly, you start to improve quite quickly, and you start to notice some new skills, and maybe you develop a new way of looking at things. And I think that it's also like a language in the sense that if you don't do it regularly enough, you can also get out of practice. So it's definitely something that I recommend for everybody to be doing, perhaps not every day, but at least 2 or 3 times a week is usually great. Here's a bit more of a glimpse into some of the content of my sketchbooks. I would say that a decent part of it is nature themed because I really enjoy drawing landscapes and nature related topics. I would say I always have a travel sketchbook too, and I do also focus on details like plants and so on. Animals are also like a kind of classic topic for me. You can see that here. And in more recent years, I've moved into focusing on cityscapes and city architecture
and trying to depict these more urban spaces. And then I've also tried to have more emphasis on drawing people. It was definitely an area that I struggled with a bit more than the other topics. And through various meetups and sketching sessions and making it part of my kind of more regular practice, I've really started to enjoy the process of depicting people a lot more than I did previously. I try and make sure that I'm drawing people in groups, drawing people that are moving, maybe people that are posing in a more traditional portrait style, or combining people I can kind of see in front of me into one picture, which is what I've done in this one. So I hope that gives you a little bit more of an idea.
So this week we're going to start our process of being visual scientists and collecting information. And I would like to tell you about the assignment. So you need to choose a place where there are people around you doing things and preferably not just sitting down or I would encourage you to choose somewhere that's a little bit like unusual for you. I think, like, for example, a lot of people like to draw in cafes, and I think it's a little bit predictable. So I think for this exercise, please try and choose somewhere that you haven't drawn in before. So I have given you some suggestions. They're just suggestions. Of course, you can make your own choice. But maybe something like a sports field is not a bad idea. Like a farmer's market, or I mean, it basically just means a market where they sell fruit and vegetables and other edible products. It could also be interesting. Of course, if the weather is terrible, you can choose somewhere like a department store or a shopping mall. It's probably a more typical choice, but it doesn't mean that you can't find anything interesting there. A park, it's also maybe not the most original choice. So if you have the option, try and choose a creative location. So we'll continue, and I'll continue to explain the task for this week. So I want you to actually focus on people this week. So we're not focusing on places, we're not focusing on backgrounds. We're just going to try and get as much information about some people we can see around us. So you should try and find somebody who is going to stay in your location a little bit longer. So it's not a great idea to choose somebody who's moving already. Just you have to make sure that you have enough time to draw them in different poses and in different ways. So I recommend that you try and find somebody, as I said, who is going to stay in the same place for a while. Of course, they can be moving, but they need to stay in your location in general. So you can imagine that you're like a scientist or you're an alien from another planet and you're studying some kind of species that you don't know much about, and you're collecting data. So you wanted to get as much information as possible. So the first thing I would like you to do is to work on sketching the full figure, so like full body sketches. And think about things like this, that you should pay attention to how they're standing and how they use their hands, what gestures they make, the way that they move. And when you have done this, you can also sketch some details from this person, like of this person. So obviously you can draw their face, but think about the face from a lot of different angles. Things like hands or feet are quite important. Maybe there are some parts of their clothing or accessories that are interesting for you that you think are important to record. And the other thing I would recommend is it's a really good idea sometimes you can add some kind of text and some notes to your page as well, so you can add some extra observations. If you want to be really like a spy, you can try and listen to their conversation if they're talking to somebody else, and maybe some parts of this are interesting and you can also write them down. And maybe the way that they interact with other people is the interesting part about them, or maybe they have a dog with them, or some I don't know, a child or something like this, or a bicycle. So if they are interacting with somebody else or something else, you should also like pay attention to this. I just thought I'd give you some examples. I always try and follow the work from other illustrators because it really like helps to inspire me with my sketching, and I can see an interesting way sometimes that they are using the materials, or like a special approach they take to like recording information. So this is Benoit Guillaume, who's a really great illustrator from France, and he's very well known for his just basically for sketching most of the time. He does a lot of architecture, but he also sketches people, and he also does scribing, which I think was what he was doing here. And I like the way that this sketching it's simple, but it's also detailed enough. And I like the way that he's using the page, and I like the way that he's including maybe parts of the lecture or conversation, or he has some notes on the page there, which is what I would like you guys to also do. And then I also thought that maybe this nice spread of heads from Jan Kebi. I think he's a Israeli illustrator who has really amazing work. I thought that, this is a nice example of what you can do in terms of having a lot of studies of a head on 2 pages. But in your case, you're very carefully observing one person at a time. So it would be great if you could, for example, fill 2 pages with the head of your person that you're observing, but try and get their head from a lot of different angles, or something like this. And then another example, which I thought was quite interesting, Japanese illustrator Studio Takiuma. I really like these cool sketches from baseball games that he has. And I like that he's showing, like, for example, on the left, he's showing the baseball player in motion, which is also something that you guys can think about. Like, you don't always need to draw the person like frozen, like they've had a photograph taken of them. You can actually like include the movement, and it could be an interesting way to study your person. And the other reason that I like this is obviously that he's also including a lot of text and notes on the page as well, which is what I want you guys to do. And then as well as the full body studies, as I said before, I really want you guys to study the person that you are observing very closely, and to try and get as much visual information as you can. So obviously, once you have enough sketches of the person, standing or different poses or gestures or their posture or the way that they walk, then you can also move on and do some like studies of closer up parts of their body. So as I said before, something like their head or something similar. Maybe some of you know Victoria Simikina. She's a really great Russian illustrator who lives in Italy, and I just wanted to include her maybe as an example. Of course, she has really great technique with capturing special kind of expressions and the interesting personality of a character on their face. But the other reason I wanted to show this to you all is to say that you don't have to always work on a white piece of paper or a white page. Like, for example, you can use gouache or you can use ink with some water added to it first, and then you can draw over the top, and it gives a really interesting atmosphere. If you don't have time to do it while you're sketching, you can actually do it in your sketchbook before you go out sketching, just to add some extra interest. So try and experiment with the materials as well. Maybe it will make the process more interesting for you if you're drawing the same person over and over. Even if there's some changes in what you're drawing, then you can also like make it more interesting by experimenting with the materials. So if we think about how much work you need to do, you need to do as much as you can. So I think I said 4 to 8 spreads in your sketchbook. A spread is 2 pages in your sketchbook. So it's spread means 2 pages which face each other. Definitely, the more you have, the better it is. So in general, you need to do these observational sketches, so sketches from life of at least 3 people. So maybe it's 7 spreads, maybe it's more, I don't know. But try and sketch as much as you can. So you're going to use this information later. So if you do as much as you can now, it will help you later on. And later in this course to produce like work that is more developed. So please don't spend too long making the images look perfect. It's not the objective of these tasks. If you're somebody who's a bit of a perfectionist, or you're somebody who spends too long on your sketches, then you have to be strict with yourself. And so, for example, you can use the timer on your phone and give yourself a time limit. So like basic sketches, they shouldn't take you longer than 5 minutes. And even 5 minutes is actually quite a long time. Especially if the person is moving or something, you really don't need 5 minutes, and it's not even technically possible. So keep that in mind. If you're doing longer sketches, you can take a little bit longer, of course. I mean, you can take 15 minutes if you're doing like a detailed study of somebody's face or something like this, or any type of sketch that takes you longer. Of course, you can give yourself 15 minutes or 20 maximum. But really, please don't spend 40 minutes or an hour on one sketch. It's not the purpose at the moment. I always recommend not to try and sketch with too many colors, because then sometimes we focus more on this, or sometimes, it's just good practice to limit your color palette. So, just think about you can even sketch in one color. It's also perfectly fine. You can sketch just in black ink, or you can sketch just with pencil, one color of pencil. If you feel like you want another color, it's also fine. But please don't use more than 2 colors for this task, because I don't think it's necessary. And the other main piece of advice is, I already said it, please try and get as much detail as possible. So, you need to really pay attention to the person that you are observing. I would like to give you a quick outline of what I take with me when I go sketching. In this case, I'm taking gouache. Everything is in a limited range of colors that I've thought about ahead of time. I have a little bit of acrylic because I can't find that shade in gouache. A range of brushes with different ends on them. Very important to have wide brushes so you can fill a space fast. Water is obviously required if you're going to use gouache or ink. Water containers that are quite compact, colored pencils, or wax pastels. You probably don't need both. If you prefer not to use the liquid materials, I can really recommend the Ecoline brush pens. They're like a very liquid marker. If you want to use ink, I really like this Ecoline brand as well. Potentially you could also take a pencil and an eraser. When I'm sketching, I don't really bother to use it at all. And I would recommend to people, if you feel like you're too fussy and too much of a perfectionist, maybe just leave the pencil at home. I put together an example of the process, more or less, for this task. I chose the local table tennis corner because of the fact that people are moving around, and it seemed like a kind of
more dynamic way to sketch people. And you can see here that I'm just sort of like doing some contour or outline sketches. And for the first part of the drawing here, I was really focusing on like pose and movement because I considered it to be fairly important. Here is one of the people I've chosen to draw. I'm sort of like working, getting more of a portrait done of her, but it's not a very complex portrait. As you can see, it's mostly just line work. I found a moment when she stopped playing table tennis and she was sitting down, and that's just a sort of quick example of sort of more multicolour compositions created with gouache in this case. All of this can be done with some of the other suggested materials. If you prefer to work with markers, it is probably a bit faster and more efficient than working with gouache for this task. And I would also just show you a few examples of some of the sketches I did. So the first ones were really much focusing on movement, and then I picked a specific person that I wanted to kind of follow and worked more with him, some portraits of him, and then I also was working with a second person and I have some more portraits of her. Would have been better to get some more action shots with her, but she moved, unfortunately. Yeah, I hope that gives you a more or less rough idea of what you need to do, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your results in the discussion session, and wishing you guys all a good luck.